Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It's spring 2017, and this is Trevor Brown in our first call from his home in Thompson, a mining town in northern Manitoba.
Someone Knows Something is one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. That's back when I'm still working in daily news and current affairs. I remember thinking, who is this David Ridgen guy? And wow, he has the best gig. He gets to really spend time on a case. He gets to dig deeply into a story. And yes, he has a great voice.
The photo of Carri, taken by a friend on a nearby street just weeks before her murder, shows the profile of a light-haired teenager smiling back at me.
Dave, please come in.
So when the CBC contacts me to ask if I'm interested in speaking with David in advance of his upcoming 9th season, I jump at the chance. In the conversation you're about to hear, David and I talk about ethics in true crime. And, spoiler alert, David gets into quite a bit of detail about his upcoming season of Someone Knows Something. You're in the whole true crime space relatively early, and I'm wondering just what you've observed in terms of changes in the years since you first started Someone Knows Something.
Well, Someone Knows Something was a podcast that I started in 2015 with CBC. I developed it there. But before that, I was doing cases as well. I mean, it wasn't called, the quotation marks true crime category, but it was investigating true crime with family members, looking into exactly the same methodologies and processes that I use in SKS. I started that in 2004. There's always been crime shows out there. None of them really like SKS, actually, in that none of them really work closely and for a long period of time with family members, specifically looking back at these cases. So when I got into the sort of scene in 2015, really, I guess Serial had been the only really other podcast in that realm that had been out. And you know what? I'm not a great podcast listener. I've never listened to Serial. I listened to about 10 minutes of it, maybe one episode or something, not even the first one. You'll be shocked to hear. I don't listen to other podcasts. I've never listened to, Laura, never listened to another true crime podcast. So I cannot tell you the answer to your question, which is, what have I observed in this sort of realm of true crime? Does that shock you?
The answer to that question is yes and no. I'd heard this about David. Now, I'm an avid listener. I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I learn from other podcasters, and sometimes I find inspiration as well. For me, it would be like writing a book without ever reading one. But I also get where David's coming from.
I just don't have time. I don't have time for it. I have so much going on with these cases, and so much I can't make the time to listen to it. And not even when I'm driving, because I'm talking to people and interviewing people as I'm driving. I just can't do it.
And is that all it is, or do you have some other reason for no? No, that's an astute observation, because I'm in the same way when I was making, and I still am making films. Started off making documentaries. I didn't really want to watch other documentaries because I didn't want to copy them. I didn't want to sort of mimic them. I didn't want to unconsciously absorb them like a sponge. I'm a sponge. And when I do my interviews, I throw back how people talk to me at them, right? So I tend to mimic things, and I just know that I'll take something in that I'll copy and I won't even recognize that I copied it. So to avoid that, and I think everybody does this. I'm not some special mutant or something. I think I would much rather develop it myself. I would much rather know that it's not derivative. And I would much rather know that what I'm doing it has a sort of, not a purity, because I don't like speaking in those terms, but sort of it's my production and it's my process. It's not like I'm copying some other process. It does help me not to watch other things. I mean, obviously I've seen lots of different documentaries. Documentaries are different, I find. They're easier and faster to watch for one reason.
podcasts for me would take too much time, and but for similar reasons. I just don't want to copy anybody, and I don't want that leveled at me. I want to take that out of the equation. I don't want people to be able to say I copied somebody.
In my experience, police in Canada can be pretty tight-lipped, especially when it comes to talking about cases that are open, unsolved. And so I'm curious if, what's your experience? Can you talk to me about how you approach that relationship?
I've had lots of different relationships with different law enforcement officers, male, female, and across North America, and actually in the world, across the world. I've talked to many law enforcement. I've worked with them closely. And, they would say it's closely, but I would say, barely sometimes. Their version of close is not my version of close, but it really depends on the individual. They're educated in law enforcement school that the media is the enemy, that we're here for a short time, not a long time, that we're looking for numbers and hits and not really anything else. And to some extent, that there's nothing wrong with that assessment. They're taught that media are the enemy. Media are here to make you look dumb, make you look stupid. They're here to make you look bad. They're here to show malfeasance in your investigations. They ruin investigations. And to some extent, each of these things have kernels of truth in them that they're educated by. So really, you do have to earn the trust of anybody you work with, and that includes law enforcement. I would say that I have a lot of respect for the detectives in law enforcement. I've met many, many, many very strong, very smart, very thorough, very passionate detectives and people that have dedicated their lives to trying to solve cases and watched those images and read those files that you can't unread and unsee. And it's awful. It can be an awful endeavor to dive into these things, as you know. So I have a lot of respect for many detectives out there. And when people conduct investigations as law enforcement, they have certain restrictions. They can gain tunnel visions. They can decide that this is what has happened, and they follow that track, and everything else falls at the wayside. They can find nothing, despite interviewing everybody and his dog. But some people can solve cases. Some officers are able to solve them. You really have to gain the trust of people. You have to show the police officer that you actually are there for the duration. And I've been around for long enough, working on cases long enough that I can show that I don't go away. And I think that that's important to law enforcement. They really just want to know, number one, that you're not going to run to quick turnaround news agency of the night and put the first wrong thing the police officer made a mistake of telling you on the air. They know that they don't want to make a mistake when they're talking to you. And I get that. I've had officers hand me boxes of files from their barns, like sort of pigeon beshitted boxes stuck under hay bales, literally. It's like out of a movie or out of SKS, and handed me files. And I've had unredacted FBI files handed to me by former FBI agents. I've also had zero help from officers, not even to tell me what the status of a case is, such as the Edmonton police in the case of Nadia Atwi. They would not give me a single iota. That police force, I would say, bar none in Canada, was the one that did not step forward to help the family of Nadia or the media around that case. But where I've had people like RCMP in Yukon, very helpful, hand me crime scene photos of Angel Carlick's, crime scene, which is awful, but they're all very helpful. They're very helpful. All the geography of cases, all those things are very helpful. So even just a couple of pictures can really open up a few doors, and even a couple of pages of investigative file. Or even somebody who's willing to confirm something. Like I went around town and I interviewed 6 people and they all said gray car. Did you hear gray car in any of your file? Did that come up? And if they're able to look and confirm or deny, even if they can confirm or deny, that's good. But somebody who can confirm, yes, I heard that too,
like, that's a great relationship, you know, and they're not going to tell you stuff. They wait till you bring them the information in those cases. I've had that happen too. I've had officers that just put me in touch with family or help me to get in touch with family and then just sort of back off. It really depends. I've had every single different experience you can imagine.
I would say my experience with the police is really similar, it sounds like, to what you've experienced. Some, great relationships and people who have been very interested in working with me and seeing if we can push things forward in some way. I say we, but that's not quite right. Yeah. Seeing if I can push things forward in some way. And then I've had incredibly frustrating experiences where I get it. Yes, I have to earn the trust.
Yep.
But sometimes it just is a wall,
Yeah, it can be a wall. And I think that, I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes police will probably try to manipulate you to do something that they can't do. And so what's happening is there's no one ever says it. It's never said between either party, but there's an expectation that's put out, like a lure when you're fishing, and you have to either take the bait and sort of go and knock on the door. They don't even tell you what door to knock on, but they know you'll get to that door, right? They know you're going to get there, and they know that you are going to be the sort of vector of finding out what they can't. And that's interesting. When you know that you're sort of, you think that they are your puppet master, and nobody's, there's no strings, it's kind of hard for other people to understand what I'm talking about. But there is an expectation sometimes that police have, that you are going to be able to hit some nail that they cannot hit. And that's why they participate with you, because they want you to find that nail and they want you to hit it hard. And I actually feel that in certain cases.
Okay, I want you to tell me more about that, because that's a line I find myself frequently walking where, maybe we have a common goal about, say, finding a missing person or a body in some cases. But how do you walk that line without, not being essentially a police agent, but actually trying to work with the information you're getting?
Well, the thing is, when I have done it, I don't really do it using information I've gotten from them. But I do, I start to get the feeling after I've gone back to them, and it's kind of like a feedback loop. So it's like, have you heard of this guy? And it's like, yes, you just know the whole tone changes, everything changes. I'm getting warmer, right? It's I'm getting warmer game, right? It's like Operation, you're just about to get that bone out without the buzzer going off. So I don't really, it's not like, okay, we want you to go talk to lefty, we want you to talk to righty, and we want you to talk to the guy in the center. I don't work that way, and I wouldn't. So I don't feel that I'm an agent of the police, but I do enjoy coming back and hearing sort of bingo, right?
Yeah.
And not that means it's the right angle. They've investigated and this guy's not in jail or this person's not in jail that we're bingoing over, but it means that police weren't able to do something. And I mean, police have guns, they go to doors, they've got uniforms, they knock, they ask questions. They don't have, the people that are engaging with police don't have to answer anything. They can say bye and shut the door, and police won't be able to go back. Right? Police can get a 15-second statement, and that's them talking to that person for the entirety of the case. There's only a certain amount of times they can keep going back without any kind of other evidence, right? But you and I can keep going back. We can go back and stand there for a long time. I mean, there are legalities. If someone tells us to leave, we have to start leaving. But there's nothing that says we can leave. We have to leave fast. And there's nothing to say that we can't go back in a different way under different circumstances. There's different rules that are, that attach to us. So you have to be aware of that. You can't just go into the scene thinking, the police are bad. I'm never going to talk to them. This isn't going to work with I'm not an agent of the police. You have to have a way of walking that line. And mine is continue my investigation, do the investigation as well as I can, see what I can glean from police and go from there. And I think it's all part of fair game for investigating these murders and disappearances.
So you just brought up a different line there, and one that I struggle with at times. When you have someone who is reluctant to speak with you, but you feel they have information, talk to me about how far you go or how far you have gone.
There's a lot of different examples, very few of which I can actually talk about. I'll give you one example that's interesting. It's somebody I was not able to talk to. This is a person for the Cheryl Shepard case, season 2, who I felt had some information. But this person was not talking to me, and I knew they were home. I knew that they were there. I scope out the important the people that I find the most important, or that I deem the most important. I always scope out. I always hang around their places or where they are, not in a creepy way, just an investigative way. I try to figure out if they're home. I want to know that they're there when I knock on the door. Sometimes I like to know that they're the ones answering the phone, so I call them when I can see them, so I know that they have that phone. I mean, this is what investigators do. And so this guy, and it was a guy, lived in Hamilton, and I knew where he lived. He would not answer the phone whenever I called. I don't block my number. I never do. I don't spoof stuff. I don't pretend to be somebody else. I never lie in any sense when I do anything. So there's no subterfuge when I'm walking up to someone's house. I'm not like pretending to be some door, like this canvasser or like some cable guy or something. It's David Ridgen from CBC podcast. Here's my frigging 8-foot long mic, and I'm standing here recording you. Like, there's no bullshit. So people know who I am, and I think that's important, like that they know. And even, I'm going to get back to the answer, but even people who have done bad things or things that would be called bad will answer the door when you're honest. I believe that. I believe that actually opens the door for you. This guy didn't. And this guy in Hamilton illustrates a point. Sometimes people don't want to talk to you, not because of what they know about a crime that you are looking into, but because they're afraid you'll find out about something else. And that is one of the prime reasons people do not talk to you, because they have something else in their life that they're afraid of you finding out, or that they're afraid will be exposed through their participation in the documentary. So that's fascinating to me. I know that that's the situation with this person because I know their background. And so then one of the things I try to do, knowing that, is that I try to let people know that all I'm interested in is this. I don't care about anything else, like that you've done or said or who you've been with or whatever. I don't care about that. All I care about is this. And I try to I don't say it directly like that, but that's one of the things you have to let people know, especially people that are, and you know who these people are. They're people that are kind of living on the edge of something, and they're involved in many different things, maybe have other kinds of records and things like that. You have to let people sit at ease talking to you about, you have to open that space and make it available for them for the case you're interested in, and just let the other stuff sit behind in the background and let them know that you're not interested in it. I mean, the truth is, if I find out that Uncle Bobby is also doing something else, I'm going to be interested in it. Let's not lie.
I want to ask you about the Angel Carli case. As a white guy reporting on the murder of an Indigenous teenager, how do you make sure you get it right?
Well, you try your best. I mean, I did everything I possibly could to make sure that I had a lot of helping hands. One of Angel's friends, Lori was there helping me. Her brother was helping me, helping themselves, with the podcast process as well. That's how I see it. And we have people at CBC, of course, that review all the tactics and review all the scripting. And there's various reviews of things before and after. And there's a lot of conversation before anything happens regarding me being white and not being of the village, which is what they call it in Whitehorse, where Angel was living at the time. So I was very conscious, and I think I expressed that in the podcast. All I can do is try my best. Obviously, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to forget something. I'm not going to be able to talk about it without. So at Angel's site, where Angel was found, Lori utters this music. She sings this song or some kind of lyrical moment that she offers to the scene, which I've to date have never heard anything like it in my life, and which sounds way over the top, but it isn't. And I've heard a lot of stuff, and this was incredible. Like I was on my knees. It floored me in the woods. I wasn't allowed to record it. I really wanted to record it. I didn't record it though. I was told not to, and I didn't. So I respected every single order I was given on every front in that realm. And I'm happy, so happy that I didn't record it. It just made me feel, I can't even describe it. I can't even describe this sort of eulogy, like singing that she was doing there. And because she had never been to the site before, I took her there. I mean, even the fact that I knew where Angel was found and nobody in the community did, right? Like the RCMP revealed to me where she was found and not to her brother, for example, is not lost on me. So immediately, of course, I want to bring everybody there. I want to spread the information, but it's not always the right thing to do. So we discussed it, Lori Strand and I and Alex, and it just wasn't the right time for Alex to go out there. So he decided that. That's why Alex was not at the site. I like to have family members in my scenes, right? Like I like to bring people along with me. I'd like to have Alex have had that experience. He was not ready for that. In many ways, he made that clear. And so Lori went, and Lori and I went out a couple of times together, and I went out about 6 times to that site. So the answer to the question is I was as careful as I possibly could have been through the processes of working with family members that I've been involved with since 2004, a white guy working in Mississippi with, African-American community onwards. It's not something I'm not used to.
Right.
I'm used to being white. I'm used to being white at the center of places where it matters that I am, and I need to be careful.
I'm also so glad you didn't record that moment, but I also understand how hard that would have been. Like every instinct probably, well, for me anyway, would have been saying, "Oh, I really want to record this."
Well, as a documentarian, you're as a fly on the wall documentarian trained in that method. Everything's fair game, right? And you're taught that, or I learned that if the camera doesn't hear it, no one cares, right? If the camera or if the mic doesn't hear it, no one gives a shit, Dave. But it teaches me. That moment teaches me more than almost anything in that season, that's okay. And I think audience appreciated it. And I think more importantly, it was appreciated by the community.
So this is, I guess, kind of a related question. Ultimately, we have to sleep at night. And I feel like if I'm kind and authentic and don't exploit my subjects, I can do the work and I can sleep just fine. So how do you handle the idea, I guess, that you're kind of sort of dining out on someone's tragedy? You know what I mean? Like, how do you handle that?
Well, I don't think of it that way. I know that's launched at people like us sometimes, but working with the family is an agreement from the beginning. It's like an unwritten contract, really, that you are working together trying to find the solution to the case, but you're also, through the process, trying to help the family and family members and community, actually, but as a result, but the family members self-heal. it's a process of healing. I mean, I always say it's not a true crime podcast. Someone knows something. It's more about a podcast about self-healing. And that's really what the contract is about. So I don't see it as exploitative when someone's trying to make themselves better. And when I work with the family with their approval on a case, I don't see it as exploitation. I can understand the question, though, and I understand it launched at people who say do a different crime every week and talk about it and then move on to the next one, and don't do investigative work and don't do sort of family outreach and work with the family and ask for permission to even talk about the case, for example. So many cases there are that I've come across where the people have never even talked to the family, and they just and they'll take my information and then sort of add their own information and then make it their podcast of the week, and they've done no work on it except to just talk about it and move on to get some more YouTube hits. I can understand the question. In my case, I don't see it. I literally can't see it as being exploitative because it's such an immersive process in looking for the solution to the crime and also the solution to the pain and the trauma. We all suffer trauma, right? We all have trauma. It's not like we don't lose each other. You know, we're going to die. We lose our fathers and our mothers and our sisters and our brothers and our kids. And that's trauma. But in true crime, and when somebody's murdered, there's additional guilts and there's additional questions and suddennesses that are not there in the sort of regular workaday death that surrounds us, if I can speak about it like that crassly. I'm not going to reorient my entire life around the fact that my father died at age 95, for example, or whatever. You know, I'm not going to reorient my life over the fact that my sister-in-law, this is a true story, was killed by a guy in a car who hit her at a crosswalk. I'm not going to reorient my life around that. It's awful and horrible, and I'll ask questions. But the guilt is not there. The same kinds of unanswered questions are not there. We have a body. True crime is different. Victims of true crime have a different level of trauma. And the process they have to go through involves confronting the case. And that's my belief. And that's what SKS does.
Do you ever encounter families where it's not, everyone is not on the same page? You know, like some people really, yeah. So
yes.
Talk to me about that.
That's a trick, that question, that method of questioning, by the way, that talked to me about that question. But anyway.
What do you mean?
Well, it's just, okay, so what do you really want to know with that question?
I have had that experience, and what I want to know is how you handle it, because I find it really hard when you have members of a family that are really wanting you to take on a case and maybe have, been asking you for some time, but then you encounter someone who's like, no, I really wish you weren't doing this. I don't want to be a part of it, and I wish you'd just stop.
Well, I guess I can talk about one situation I had where it's hard because people are going to be able to figure out who I'm talking about, so I'll have to kind of couch it. But anyway, family members can disagree. And, a mother can want me there, a father cannot want me there. A sister cannot want me there for various reasons. Generally, in those situations, I'll be informed of that right off the bat, and that's a discussion we have right away. And often it can be worked out. I found that if you want to do this and it's important to you, you being the family member, the mother who has called me or whatever, let's say in this example, then we recognize that it's important to you, but we don't want any part of it. So that's fine. Sometimes you'll hear podcasts, and I'm not going to name them, but you'll sort of know that there's other people in the family that have never been heard from. And the reason is because they didn't want to participate. And as for me going forward, all I need to know is that it's okay that I work on this case with this family member who really wants me to. Once I get past that, then everything's fine. It doesn't matter to me if they participate. And often what happens is after about the third interview in town, I'm getting a call from that person who wouldn't participate, and now they want to talk because they see that I came. They see that I'm walking the talk. They see that I'm getting information, and the proof's in the pudding, basically. So I've earned their participation.
David, I heard you in an interview at some point say that, no, this is not a bad thing. Say you have to love your subjects, no matter who they are. I've interviewed some people who have done horrible things. I know they've done horrible things. They've been convicted of doing horrible things. And yet I agree with you in the sense that I feel like in order to get people to open up to me, I have to connect with them on like a human level. Like I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, how you kind of work through that when maybe you even feel like some anger towards these people, and it's hard not to sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a quote that I could say again and again and again. You have to love all of your subjects. You have to want. I mean, love is, you can classify love, it doesn't, love is a many-pronged thing, but you do have to at least respect the areas of gray that surround all your subjects, and you have to give the space, you have to make the space for them to want to talk to you, and you have to create that luck in order for them to walk into it. I believe that every single person that has done something such as a murder has enabled themselves somehow in their lives to murder somebody else or to conceal a murder that somebody else has done. I believe that they all want to talk about it. And I think that you are the person who is there to get them to do that. And the only way to do that is to make the space available. And to make the space available, you have to make an agreement with yourself that it's okay to offer this person an emotional space that they've not been offered before. So that includes respect and love. And I think that in the new season of Someone Knows Something, there is a character who is very difficult for me to deal with. And even speaking about the terms of what we've just talked, or what I've just talked about, and relating them back to this person is difficult because I know exactly what he did, and I know exactly where he did it and when he did it. And when you know those details, it doesn't necessarily change your expectations of humanity, but it does make you wonder about your approach to that particular person. I still stand by the statement, though. I think you do need to love all your subjects.
So, David, I have probably a million more questions I could ask you, but I want to get to your new season, and you've just touched on it there. So tell me about your new season.
The new season of Someone Knows Something. This is season 9. It's amazing that there's been 9 seasons. I've pretty much got season 10 almost completed as well, but we're talking about season 9 here. Season 9 is about Christine Harron. Christine Harron was 15 years old on May 18th, 1993, when she disappeared in the town of Hanover, Ontario. And Chrissy was sort of a rebellious teenager, somebody I could identify with, actually. Big glasses. She liked to read, and she liked kids and playing out in nature, frogs and streams and things like that. She didn't like school. And on this day, May 18th, 1993, Chrissy, as her mom calls her, had an argument with her mother, didn't want to go to school, felt sick. And this went on kind of through the morning and into the afternoon. And she was kind of lying on the couch with her mother. I think that the truancy officer phoned from the school in Hanover and said, "Where's Chrissy? Where's Christine? She has to get to school." So eventually, I guess there was kind of an agreement that Chrissy would go to school. And she left, slamming the door. "Goodbye, Mom," and went down the street. And Marianne, who is Chrissy's mom, saw Chrissy disappear around the corner and never saw her again. So the case kind of languished almost immediately. The local police, Hanover Police at the time, was like a local police force in Ontario at that time, said, oh, she's a runaway. She's just a runaway. She'll be back. There were rumors that she was seen in Toronto with some skinheads or something. And there's always tends to be rumors about young girls and young boys when they go missing, that they've just run away and they'll be back. It tends to stymie a lot of investigations. It's incredible how many investigations are kind of slowed down by this sort of weird expectation that they've just run away. I think it's a statistics game. I think that in 80% of cases, the kids always come home. But in this case, it ruined the initial stages of the investigation. So the Hanover police were not able to find any information. Chrissy disappeared off the face of the earth. And that went on till 1999. The Ontario Provincial Police then took over. The OPP came in and reinvestigated Chrissy's case. They spoke to all the people that the Hanover police had spoken to and more, and nothing happened. Chrissy, nobody knew anything about her. No one had seen her, and that's the way the case stayed until August 2004. So this is like 11 years later. 11 years later, mid-August, sometime at a party, this fellow named Anthony Ringle comes forward to his family, who he was partying with all day. Anthony had been drinking, and there was some print that I've read that says that there was someone smoking marijuana near him. And he says to his family, I killed Chrissy. I killed Christine Harron. He picks up the phone and calls 911, then decides to hang up. But the police come anyway because it's a 911 hang up. And the officer comes to this party. This is mid-August 2004 again. And as the officer walks up the stairs to this house, Anthony Ringle walks down the stairs, holds up his hands as if to say, put the handcuffs on me. And he says, I did it. I killed Christine. And I can show you where I buried her. So you think, okay, the case is solved. This guy the guilt has welled up in Anthony, and he is, for whatever reason at this party, I gathered that there was an argument and he wanted to kind of make a grand statement, and he sure did. Said to his family he killed Chrissy, said to the police he killed Chrissy. So the police take him to the police station and begin immediately interviewing him, Anthony. And eventually he confesses. He confesses even more. He tells police what he did, where he met Chrissy, what they did that day, how he killed her, what he did with her afterwards. And Anthony's put in jail to await trial. And the trial comes 2006. So he confesses 2004. The trial is 2006. And what happens is throughout the pre-trial, it becomes evident with heart sinking that police made some mistakes in their investigation. And none of this information had been published before. At the time, I was working on a documentary with Chrissy's mom at the time, which I'm going to get into. And none of it had been published before. Nobody really knew. But basically, the case was thrown out because of these mistakes in 2006. So fast forward another 3 years, and I find out about the case. I realize that there's a viable suspect. The case collapsed. Ringle is free. Anthony Ringle still lived in Hanover at that time. I'm like, this is a case I can maybe make a difference on. So I contact Chrissy's mom, Marianne, who watched her disappear that day. Marianne says immediately she'd love to work with me on this case. So in 2009, I began working with her. And CBC at the time, the National had a back half called, I think it was called The Journal or something. Yep. Yeah. And they would have documentaries. So I was commissioned to do several of these true crime documentaries in the wake of the Mississippi work. And one of them was Christine Harron. So I worked with Marianne's mom till 2011 on this case, or 2012. And we worked together looking into the case, and I showed her all these documents about what happened in the court, and she had no idea what Ringle had said or any of the material that was on the docket in that courtroom. And I spoke to Ringle, but before I was able to speak to him, I went with Marianne to Ringle's sister's place, which is where he was living at the time. And Marianne bravely knocked on the door and wanted to talk to him face to face. I mean, part of the reason I think Marianne agreed to do this was that she's always had questions for Ringle. She always wanted to know why what happened, in more detail than the pages could provide that I was able to get from the courts. So Ringel refused to speak to us that day. He was downstairs in the basement doing, sleeping or supposedly sleeping, but I think he was just hiding. And then so it turns out that I was able to go find Ringel in this RV park, which is close by. So I'm able to talk to Ringel after looking for him for quite a while at his RV. And that's in the documentary as well. So all of this work, looking at the police malfeasance, trying to talk to Ringel, trying to find out from police what happened, goes into a 20-minute television documentary that airs on CBC. It goes to air in 2012, May 18th. I think we went on the anniversary of disappearance. So Chrissy disappeared May 18th, 1993. And this TV documentary goes to air 2012 in May. And 2 or 3 months after that, police start an undercover investigation into Ringel after that documentary went to air. And so the undercover investigation, it isn't a Mr. Big. It's kind of like a Mr. Big, but there is no Mr. Big character. But these scenarios are police basically perform roles where they try to befriend somebody and get them to trust them enough to tell them something. And obviously, in this case, they befriended Ringel and tried to get him to talk about Chrissy, what happened that day, tried to get him to reconfess, basically. And again, this is in the wake of the CBC thing going to air. So they go to the same trailer park. They set up a trailer. They have an undercover officer in the trailer park who befriends Ringel. Then they move the whole operation to Chesley, which is a small town near Hanover. Ringel was living there at the time. And they set up a little apartment, and they have cameras all over the apartment. And then they work for months and months and months to try to get Ringel to confess again or to talk about Chrissy's case. And they take him to strip clubs, and they take him to malls on shopping trips, and they take him to bowling alleys, and they take him to pool halls and restaurants. And Ringel does not talk about Chrissy's case. And eventually there's a point where it's like, should we continue or should we not continue? They decide to keep going for a while. The short story is somebody comes up with the idea to show Ringel my documentary.
How? Like what? How is that explained?
I'm not going to tell everything that's in the podcast. But so they come to the point where they're able to show Ringel my documentary. So this is February 2013. They start to show him the doc. It's 20 minutes long, and it takes them 4 hours to get through it because he keeps asking them to rewind it and go back over things. And he starts confessing almost immediately. He confesses to killing Chrissy. He tells the story of what he did, and he's using the points in the documentary as points of launch points for telling his information. So basically it works. I mean, the strategy of showing the documentary gets Ringel to confess that he killed Christine. Shortly thereafter, he's rearrested, a couple more years in jail. 2016, there's a trial, and he's convicted, and he's in jail, second-degree murder.
So sorry if I missed this in your recounting. In that initial, after he's at the party and he tells his friends, does he take the police to where she is?
That's part of the malfeasance. So that's explained in the podcast, but that's part of the police error.
Okay.
But there is a moment where that happens.
That sounds like an incredible story. One of the things that the 91-year-old mother who lives with me tells me frequently is that she dislikes it that my podcasts never have a definitive ending.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, but you know what? Anyway, so what's your answer? What's your answer when you hear that?
Well, I'm just going to say this season 9 sounds like it will. But anyway, she will like that. But I would say what I say to her in those moments is there isn't an ending yet. And that is what the families are living with. And part of my storytelling is talking about that, right? Like how Michael Dunahyee's mom can get up every morning for 30 odd years and still try to have a good, worthwhile life and live with the fact that she doesn't have answers and she doesn't know what happened to Michael, you know? So my stories don't always have an ending, but there is, I think, still a worthwhile story to tell.
Well, yeah, there's still a process. There's a worthwhile process, right? I mean, you're taking people into those processes and it's going to help the person who's affected by it the most. Like, how can that not be an ending? I get this, it's too bad SKS never solves anything. And it's like, well, you haven't really listened, have you? You know, you haven't really listened. Time will solve things. There's certain cases I've worked on where time is going to work in its favor. I have solved several of the cases, but it takes time. I mean, if you want a courtroom gavel to fall and you want to hear that as that's your definition of solution, that's easier than solving the trauma that's going to be affecting the family for the rest of their lives and the community who never lets their kids go play in the playground anymore and all those other things, right? Like it depends on your definition of, you know, solved.
I'm guessing I don't need to tell you guys where to find Someone Knows Something. David's show is a worldwide hit. Podcasting from my little corner of the universe here in Port Alberni can be a lonely endeavor. So it was good to speak with David, and I hope you found the discussion worthwhile as well. I'm chipping away on my next season, which I hope to release early in 2025. In the meantime, I'll be dropping update episodes on past cases as new information arises. I'm Laura Palmer, and this is Island Crime.